So today I'm in Groton, Connecticut, in a coastal forest dominated by oak and black birch with some American beech. And I'm along a swollen creek. We probably got 5 inches of rain today, and this is a really nice waterfall. Carving through some granites, real deep. It's usually just a trickle. Isn't that nice? Here we got the American beech. And this is oak-laurel, a very common shrub. It pretty much makes up the majority of the shrub layer in here. So all the shrubs throughout here, that's all oak-laurel. My dog's going to be daring now, and she's going to go dip herself into the water. She's going to get carried downstream. Don't step on me. Ah, it's nice. It's a good looking waterfall right there. Kind of a small preserve. You can see the houses aren't too far. So it's just a little fragment of a forest. Not the largest thing in the world. Beautiful. Foam here is protein. So it's just kind of a mixture of organic matter that, you know, gets all kind of conglomerated in the bubbles, aerated out, and it kind of collects in areas. So the bubbles pick up these little tiny organic bits and deposit in these foam mats. And these foam mats have a lot of proteins in them, a lot of nutrients. Got a very common shrub in the richer areas. This is Linderna benzoin, or the spice bush. These little buds will be yellow flowers in April and March, and it's the host plant for the spice bush butterfly, the black swallowtail, I believe. One of my favorites. Nice kind of yellow fall foliage, and it has this red berry that tastes like vomit, so don't eat its fruit. Another old dam that was likely used to power a sawmill, either to process cloth or to cut wood. One of the two. Oh, here's a terrible invasive plant. This is burning bush, euonymus, and then right here we have Japanese spirea, another up and coming invasive. Both of them are very common in the horticultural trade. This is another one that used to be common, but they took it out because it's invasive. This is Lonicera. I forget what the exact name is. Lonicera japonica. It's also called climbing honeysuckle, and it's hella invasive. Takes over entire forests, especially those along the coast. I used to work on Fisher's Island, and the island is pretty much just this and bush honeysuckle. Both horrible invasives. Here's where the dam is. It broke through over at the end over here, and I wouldn't be surprised if the middle of the creek probably went to around here. Maybe not. Maybe this is like the old spillway and it finally broke through. This one was probably constructed in the mid-1800s. You can see that they used concrete or some other aggregate to keep the stones together. Don't go in there. Thank you. More Japanese spirea. You can see that it's getting big. It's going to take over the forest. This is like one of the only forests where I've seen it invade. And it's pretty easy to pull out, but you know, with how it's spreading, all these little seeds will become more plants. They're growing right on the creek, so the seeds will float, get deposited downstream. You know, just a pattern of invasiveness. That's just the way it goes sometimes. Carpinus carolinea, or the musclewood, a tree in the birch family. It's known to have these kind of deep ridged, not really ridged, but really strong wood, and it has like these kind of, I don't know, veins and ridges, sinews. It feels like a muscle, like a nice strong arm. And it has these little birch danglies. That's what it's I guess its flowers look like. Ooh, isn't that nice? A little sunset action going on there. But they're a shade tree, or a floodplain tree. Trying to show you a bud, but it keeps breaking. Let's see. There's its buds. Yep. Easy to identify, mostly due to its bark. So in this area, it's absolutely filled. So everything with these kind of brownish stems, brownish reddish, is the Japanese spirea, so it's everywhere here. It's the worst area that I've seen with it. Luckily, it's not spiny. Here's a close relative to the musclewood. This is hop hornbeam, or Ostraya virginica. It's another birch family plant. And you can tell the difference because the bark is usually a little bit more flaky and the leaves usually stay on. The buds also are a little bit larger, and they typically grow from a single stem or trunk rather than a few. The ones I found are over there. Those are grown from multiple stems. Pretty cool. Horribly invasive Japanese barberry, Berberis thunbergii. This is a horticultural atrocity. This is a horrible plant. Sold at Home Depot, and it takes over wetlands. Not fun, and the berries taste like crap too. Very pokey and a pain in the butt to dig out. And it spreads like a wildflower, or wildfire. Gets out of control quickly. There's a shelf fungus in the genus Sturium. These are pretty common, and they grow on dead oaks, as well as beeches and birches. I like the coloration. You see them more in winter and fall, but you can also see them in spring and summer. Very nice. This is a trail, and this is what happens to them. They become little creeks because they end up getting eroded, kind of like that, in a U-shaped, and it becomes the easiest area for water to go down. Not to mention that they are compacted, so water will preferably go down them rather than soak in through. But it also opens up the, it's not all bad, it also opens up the opportunity for wildflowers that would otherwise grow along creeks to grow along paths. So now we're at the interface between an open oak forest and an oak-laurel forest. And the oak-laurel forest is dominated by, you guessed it, red and white oaks and mountain laurel, Kalmia latifolia. These tend to be very species poor, being really only mountain laurel, and maybe you get some monotropa in there, or the Indian pipes. Those are super common. But they're like the only thing that'll grow under there. In open patches, you might get a blueberry or maybe a witch hazel. But other than that, they're very uninteresting to explore. They look great in June, and they're evergreen in the summer, or in the winter, I mean. So they're not all bad, but they're pretty species poor. But there's lots of moths that eat their leaves, and a lot of birds eat those moths, and then they also produce tons of seeds. So they're good for that too, and I really enjoy how they look. It just sucks that more can't grow underneath them. I have a beautiful dendrolycopodium grown in the lowlands, as well as this is a smilax. It could be the normal common smilax, the common smilax, the green briar. I can't remember the name, but it looks a lot like it. But it's different. It doesn't have a thick spiny stem, and that could be because it's growing in the deep shade, because there's tons of it up in the uplands, but they're much thicker. They have much thicker branches. I'll show you a video of what those look like. So I want to say this is likely the same species, maybe a hybrid, maybe it's just a weird form, but it's a form that is distinct because this isn't the first time I've seen it like this. So it could be like a wetland form, but they're beautiful, beautiful vine. When they're big and pokey, like the common one is, such a horrible, like you never want to walk through a greenbrier forest. Like I actively avoid them like the plague. They suck to hike through. Here's your Monotropa uniflora, the ghost pipe. These will be little white flowers in the summer. I've even seen them bloom in the fall, so they're really cool. This floodplain's nice and full. Right here we have winterberry holly, an ilex. I can't remember the scientific name, but it's an ilex, and the common name is winterberry holly. And everybody knows a winterberry holly, and winterberry holly is always the same type of ilex. At least that's what I know of. I could be completely wrong. But anyways, this floodplain is super full, overflowing its boundaries, pretty much being the entire floodplain, if not a little bit more. Like pretty much wherever the clethra gets to, it's flooded. But it's probably like 4 times the size. Usually the central channel is like that. It's a little creek. And it's really shallow. And this, I was here in the winter last year, and it was completely frozen over. It was like we had a rain like this, and then the next day we had a super freeze, and it was all ice. Unfortunately, I didn't get out as much as I wanted to that day, but it's still beautiful. I'll have to share pictures of that one day. Not one day soon, that's for sure. I believe we have a beautiful oyster mushroom. I'm not sure what kind of type it is. It could be an oysterling, it could be not an oyster mushroom, but it's a guild mushroom at that. And it's growing out of it's a living red maple. So this one's still alive, but it's suffering. Surviving on the central rotten deadwood, likely. Look at that. Beautiful. Nice brown creamy coloring. Good form. Beautiful orangey underside with the nice gills. Real fragile and soft. Gorgeous. Growing in the winter. Cool stuff. Now we're in Briar Oaklands. So it's an oakland with thin soils dominated by greenbrier. It's Smilax. Maybe it's Smilax rotundifolia. That might be the scientific name, but it's dominated by this. And you typically see this because these should be fire-prone areas, so there's no fire to keep them down. Deer are crazy here, so they'll mow down everything that's not a greenbrier, and they'll selectively avoid greenbrier. And then after that, because it's not open, it doesn't get a whole lot of new light. And also, before it was a heavily exhausted field soil. So basically, greenbrier existed, so it might have been like ranching or grazing. And so the grazing animals for a while selected for, not just deer, but selected for the greenbrier. So that would be deer, sheep, because this used to be a sheep farm. That's why you see pasture walls here and there. And so this usually indicates kind of a poor habitat. Good for moths and birds, just not for botany. There isn't a whole lot going on in these areas. Whereas the open laurel lands, these have a little bit more going on, but really the big ticket is the lowlands. That's where you'll find all the cool stuff. In the uplands, everything's a little bit more further spread out. You gotta cover a lot more ground to see a lot more stuff. Look at that nice American beach. Beautiful. Probably definitely a mature forest, probably around 100 years old, maybe a little bit older. Gotta say, really nice. This is what it's like to go through a greenbrier oak forest. Real slow moving unless you got iron pants on. And by what I mean is iron pants is like pants that repel these half-inch spines. Oh my god, they suck so much. They're about 4 feet tall. So you have to just kind of crawl your way through, limp your way through, go ow a bunch of times. This is why I only wear pants when I hike. Oh my god. They're like the cactus of the north. Or just spiny shit, it's awful. Anyways, they have nice big green leaves. Come on. Look, she's sitting right there with her eyes. Come on. She's just like, no, I'm not doing that. Screw out of here. Come on, guy. She disagrees. I had to go back for her. Darn. The evergreens over there, all those dark blotches, that's eastern red cedar or juniper, or Juniperus virginiana, I think, or virginica, one of those two. But it is it's juniper. It's an evergreen tree that likes open. It's a colonization species. What's the word? Man, give me a second. It's colonial. It's a colonial species. So it's the first to get into an area. A colonizer. There you go. It's a colonizer plant. Same thing with this greenbrier. And so these will eventually be shaded out by the oaks, and they'll die and rot away. And then slowly this forest will build back up its soil layer and will become probably an oak-laurel forest. That's usually what the nature of growth as these forests get older. Because you can kind of think of the elevation as a forest age chart or forest growth speed. So basically wetlands are like peak ecosystem. You know, they got all the water, they can grow throughout the season, no problem. Whereas the uplands, they're drier. They mature over a longer space of time. So that might take, 50 years to mature, whereas the uplands can take 100, 150, especially dry uplands, probably 200 years to mature. So this is, I'd say, a second growth. You got the oaks. The oaks and the red cedars were first growth, and second growth is stuff like red maple and musclewood and black birch and beech. So it'll slowly change over time as more organic layer builds up and holds more moisture. But definitely don't botanize here. Never fun to botanize a briar area. You really don't find much. You go to a heathland, you'll find more to do in a heathland than a briarland. Not to mention heathland's a little bit easier to walk through. Briarlands are made of briars. They're not fun. I'm also at around 300 feet elevation, if you were wondering. Now you know. This area is what you would call a glade. They're usually the peak of highlands or little hills. And they have really thin soil with a lot of exposed bedrock. Very spread out trees, and these areas can have a lot more species in them because they're sunnier. And they also offer just different habitats, so you can find capnoides up here, all sorts of fun stuff. I bet you capnoides grows here, because I love finding capnoides, Beautiful plants. Go watch my last video. Go wait for the capnoides to happen. If you see the capnoides, you know it's real nice.